professor, physician, epidemiologist. I am Dr. Sri Banerjee. I am Dr. Sri Banerjee, core faculty for the College of Health Sciences and Public Policy at Walden University. In this video, I'm going to take a different approach, slightly different than what you're used to in many of my videos. What I'm going to do here is talk about more of an environmental factor, and then kind of show you some of the effects that have that come about from disturbing our ecosystem. It's important to note that we have a very delicate ecosystem. This means that our corals and ocean life and biodiversity is affected. And so trying to ensure that we preserve this biodiversity is of utmost importance. So let's go ahead and get started and take a look at this. Corals are considered the rainforest of the ocean. If we think about the role that corals play within the ecosystem of the ocean and the balance that it provides for habitats within the ecosystem, then you'll quickly find out and know why coral reefs are so important. Besides its grandiosity and its beauty, there's definitely a critical role that these animals play under the ocean. And so I think it's really critical that we not only explore what happens when things don't go the right way and we start to lose corals, how that process happens, but more importantly, what the impact is, not only in fisheries, habitat, but also the surrounding environment and how it affects people. So let's think about what are some reasons why coral bleaching events take place. Coral bleaching events are not ideal at all because this results in the death of the coral, and then the whole habitat falls apart. So what is really important and needed is for the marine ecoregion to have minimal coral bleaching events. What I'm going to show you is in 1998 that was a single worst bleaching event year in recorded history. And so that is a year when El Nino was strong, and this warming cycle actually destroyed a lot of habitat. So global warming has a lot to do with this. So transitioning over to looking at the USGS website about coral reefs. They have a lot of good information regarding this, and they start with a nice picture of this, and then they go over a lot of data and web tools and applications that are available. But I encourage you to go through this website. They show you and talk about how even though corals cover less than 0.5% of the Earth's surface, 25% of the marine species are there. Additionally, they are of great economic importance as well. So just thinking about how, just like in tropical rainforests, there can be 1 million species within coral reefs. So we've only scratched the surface of understanding the coral reefs and what type of role they play within the ecosystem. There's uh, a lot of associations connected with also land use histories, looking at how environmental change and degradation potentially has affected land use, that has affected the environment over time. And then also looking at kind of questions about coastal groundwater and the connection of the groundwater to reef flow and coral reef health. And so that allows for the connection to really be understood. And then another important area is hydrodynamics and sediment processes. So just better understanding of how the tides and the waves and the currents and both land and reef-derived sediment that influences the coral reefs. So you're probably beginning to see really, if you didn't know too much about coral reefs, how critical they are to our environment, and we have to really first thing that's really important is to map out where all of these coral reefs are. And as I said earlier, I'm going to present to you a map that I made from looking at data and the worst coral bleaching event that has taken place in history. So I encourage you to again go through this and also look at these various tools that are available at the top. There's a lot of data that is available from the coral reef ecosystem studies. They're called CREST for short. And then there's good bathymetry. So these are some good remote sensing sort of studies. And then also looking at flooding and the effect, the damage to coral reefs from flooding. So good data on that, and then you also have access to some web tools. Then I'm going to switch on over to looking at the map that I made. So here's the map that I made, and just looking at some of the variables here. Let me actually close these side maps, and then you can probably quickly see here this map. The areas with coral bleaching events the highest are actually in red. Some of the northern Gulf of Mexico variables are missing, and so I was not able to provide adequate shading or color here. But just looking at some of the Caribbean, there was, due to the El Nino event, there's quite a few bleaching events. And then over here near the island of Bermuda, and then down over here. So these are some examples. So now coming back to just thinking about the 5 points and ways that coral bleaching negatively affects the environment and people living close to it. So just thinking about this biodiversity, of course, I already talked about, but also coastal protection. So just understanding that what happens on land actually impacts the health of the coral reefs and vice versa. If you looked at the map closely from the 1989 bleaching event, then you probably quickly saw that these areas are located very close to the coastal region. So they're close to the land, so a lot of the water that is on land can affect what is in the ocean. And so this really fine appreciation of these connections within the environment is critical to understanding just how crucial it is to saving the corals. Coral bleaching is often related to the El Nino Southern Oscillation cycle. So that is a climate phenomenon characterized by large-scale changes in sea surface temperature and sea level pressure across the tropical Pacific. So if you think about what is happening here and how this can really affect the surrounding ecosystem, this is a major weather pattern. And so the surrounding areas have kind of a warm, wetter area. And then there's other regions of the country where the temperatures are cooler and the weather patterns are drier, so you won't see as much precipitation in these areas. So directly, really, what is happening is so the higher water temperature also has lower sea levels over the reef. So this could be in the Caribbean or also in the Samoan reefs there and near Australia as well. So in the Pacific, these can expose them to air and increased sunlight, and too much exposure to sunlight actually causes bleaching. So after the bleaching event that I told you about, the most recent one was in 2015 as a result of the strong El Nino conditions. So these continue to happen, so it's really important to not only understand what is taking place in advance, but also kind of understand how to protect the coral reef. So because after all, let me end with the three major impacts. So local economies are really dependent, not only if you're thinking of food source, but ecotourism, and so the economies of the Caribbean islands are very much dependent on these. And so then also medicinal research. There's a lot of compounds that can be found in reefs, which are apparently have been found to be beneficial for cardiovascular disease. And then also 500 million people worldwide are dependent on food that is being sustained by habitats within the coral reefs. So we're not just talking biodiversity. There are 500 million people that depend on this as food. So these should be convincing reasons and good reasons to know why we need to conserve corals for not just us, but for future generations to come. Thank you for listening.